Take the microphone over to...
How you doing, all right?
How long?
3 minutes.
3 minutes.
On the 9th of October 2018, I had exclusive access to a serial killer for what would turn out to be the last interview of his life.
All right, here I am. This is Chris Cuomo in New York, testing out the IFB, or the speakerphone. Can you hear me?
For a decade, this man hunted women in the United States and mercilessly killed them, operating with impunity under the radar of law enforcement.
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can. There's a little bit of a delay, but that's okay. That's something that I'll deal with.
And even though he killed more women than Jack the Ripper, very few of us have ever heard his name. How did someone get away with so many murders for so many years? And what is going on in his mind?
I'm kind of concerned about what kind of questions you're going to ask me.
I'm the one who's going to determine the questions.
All right?
All right, good. So if you're ready to begin, we will. All right, everybody there in that room is okay and ready to be quiet?
Yes.
So we'll start in 3, 2, 1.
Toward the end of the day, dozens of crows settle in the trees of Saddleback College in Mission Viejo, California. The collective term for these birds is a murder.
As I was walking through here, I felt really something not right, and I was actually really scared, very, very scared. And as I walked towards the library door, I started to hurry as fast as I could.
Still now, every time she comes on campus, Julia Brady Jenner can't help but remember the night of January 18th, 1986.
I got to the side door here, and I pulled the door handle, and it was locked. It had locked automatically.
With no one in sight, she wandered around the dark campus with the strangest feeling in her gut.
There was something going on, and I can only say evil. It was just bad, and I had no idea what was happening.
The campus was practically empty after a big concert. Julia had recently taken a teaching job there, and on nights when she was working late, refused to walk to her car alone. She finally found a colleague who agreed to drive her to her car.
We looped around to the far back row where we were parked, and so when the headlights came around the corner, we saw her on the pavement and stopped.
In the headlights, they saw a woman lying on the ground.
I recognized the dress right away, and her dress was pulled up, and her purse was down on the ground, and I thought, well, this doesn't make sense.
It didn't make sense because the dress belonged to one of her students with whom she'd spent most of the evening. They parted ways only half an hour earlier.
When you see a body like that, it really doesn't look real. It almost looked like a rag doll of sorts. And I hate to use that term because that's awful, but that's what it was.
The scene was a bloodbath. The young woman had been stabbed 41 times.
We were so fearful. The first thing we said was, there's a psychotic person here running amok on campus. And it was because of the brutality of it. We didn't know if he was right there, if he was hiding behind a tree. The level of fear was ramped up even more because he stabbed her so much.
Police asked Julia to help identify the body.
And it took me about, I'm gonna say, a few minutes to really say her name, because they said, we really do need you to tell us. We need a confirmation. I said, Robin Brandley.
Robin Brandley, 23 years old, a communications student at Saddleback College who'd volunteered to work as an usher at the campus concert that night.
It has always been hard over the years to say her name. Robin is this beautiful girl whose life was cut short and who was a friend of mine, who I thought was wonderful.
started investigating.
There really was minimal evidence, and it was very random.
Helen Moreno is a retired supervising investigator with the Orange County District Attorney's Office.
There was no rape. There was no loss. There was nothing taken. So there just really was no evidence that led us in any one direction.
They kept talking about it being a crime of passion because it was very brutal. They had a few suspects here and there. Some were in my class. The police told me that. You just have to go on teaching as if, but if you find anything out, you need to let us know.
Life on campus felt unsafe.
We all felt that we really needed clearly to know who did this and that we would know immediately.
But time passed and answers were scarce. They could find no one with a motive to kill Robin.
There were times where I'd walk into my radio class and the detectives would be sitting in the back of the room trying to be inconspicuous.
They were interviewing family, friends, acquaintances. They would do patrols around the college. They were looking for any other type of random incidents that may be similar, but nothing that they looked at panned out.
And at one point then, as things were not working out, as they were following other clues, they left.
There were no suspects, just a remarkably violent murder that ended up going cold.
There's no logic or reasoning behind what happened to her.
That was the first of a string of seemingly unconnected murders. All women, all unsolved. In July of 1988, the body of Julie McGee is found in a desolate part of the desert near Palm Springs. That case goes cold because of lack of evidence. 2 months after that, Mary Ann Wells, single mother, found in a downtown alley in San Diego, California. There was an expended shell casing from the bullet that killed her, but it's not enough for authorities to identify the killer. That case goes cold also. The following year, 1989, 18-year-old Tammy Irwin is found shot dead in the desert near Palm Springs. She was dressed in shorts with white cloth tennis shoes, lying face down in the blood-soaked earth. Another unsolved murder. And then, in 1992, a young woman called Jennifer Asbenson came running out of the desert screaming that she'd just been kidnapped and assaulted by a madman.
I felt like a trapped wild animal that was about to be butchered.
When we come back, Jennifer comes face to face with a terrifying killer. September 1992, Palm Springs, California. 19-year-old Jennifer Asbenson had to get to work in the neighboring town, Desert Hot Springs. She didn't have a car, and she had just missed the bus.
I was racking my brain with who do I know, who can give me a ride. Oh, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to lose my job.
What kind of person were you at that point in your life?
I felt a lot like a child still, childlike, but I was becoming an adult. My mother was abusive. I felt like all of the negative and bad things in the world pretty much happened in my own home. I didn't want to stay in that frame of mind that I was an abused child and I'm not going to go anywhere. I had goals and dreams.
Jennifer had just moved out of her parental home. For the first time, she was independent, embarking on her adult life.
I was a certified nurse assistant and I took care of handicapped, disabled children. And my job was to work the nocturnal shift.
It was already dark, and it would be a while before the next bus.
I just thought, I'm going to get in trouble if I am late. And I hear a voice from over here on the side of me say, hey, do you need a ride? And I just automatically said, no, I'm okay, thank you. And then it hit me. This guy's offering you a ride. That's something you need.
He didn't sound menacing.
No. He was nice. He looked small. He had a weak sounding voice. Just, hey, do you need a ride? And so I just said, hey, wait, where are you going? And he said he was going towards Desert Hot Springs. And that's exactly where I was going. I rushed behind his car and I thought, look at his license plate, just in case, try to memorize it. And right when I sat down and he started talking, I just forgot about it because he came off as a little strange, but harmless. Just maybe not that social. It was just like two awkward people in a car trying to have a conversation.
There was no stranger danger alarm going off in her head.
I just thought, okay, this guy's a little weird, but at least I'm not going to get fired.
But during the ride, there were some creepy moments.
We stopped at a red light. He asked what my goals and dreams were in life, and I said to be an actress. And he said, oh, like a porn star? And I went, oh, you sicko. No, not a porn star. And he stopped and he goes, what'd you call me?
It was 10 p.m. on Sunday night when the man dropped Jennifer off and asked for her phone number.
I gave him a fake number. I just changed the last digit of the number. Then I went into my job. I made it on time. I worked there all throughout the night without incident.
That Monday in September of 1992, she left the group home right before 6 a.m. and decided to take a different route home.
Just wanted to avoid him if he was coming. And when I got almost to the corner, I heard the gravel on the road. In a car, I heard the tires going over the gravel, and I knew that it was him. He said, good morning, how are you? Did you want to go to breakfast?
She couldn't figure out how to say no gracefully without offending him.
And so I just turned and looked at him. He looked friendly, and I didn't feel scared. I just thought, oh, geez, now I've got to deal with him again. He rolled down the passenger window, and he just was nice.
She got in the car.
It was daylight. It was this light out.
Immediately, he brought up the fake phone number she'd given him.
What went through you when he started asking you about the fake number?
I started stuttering, which made it very apparent that I was lying. He just turned into another person, and he just screamed, it wasn't the right number. I called the number, and some old bitch answered. And when he did that, he went from a nice person to something sinister. And then he pulled over. He slammed my head into the dash, pulled my hands behind my back. I saw a gun. I saw a knife. Then he started tying my hands, my wrists together with twine. Then he just took off and he started driving down a main road. Your mind is paralyzed, your body is paralyzed. And then it struck me, yes, he is doing this because I gave him a fake number.
Well, no. He was doing this because he was a savage, evil monster, and this is what he did. You didn't bring this upon yourself. He marked you from the moment he had you in the car.
Right.
And so it began, a life and death drive into the desert.
Who's gonna just pop up in the middle of this desert to save me?
So how did Jennifer live to tell the tale of her abduction by this serial killer? When we come back. 19-year-old Jennifer Asbenson accepted a ride from a stranger. It was now an abduction. She was trapped in a car with a raging lunatic barreling away from desert hot springs heading toward the middle of nowhere. She recalls the horrifying details vividly. Be advised, they're very tough to hear. The reason we're including them is because she's the only witness to how this serial killer operated.
I was in the car next to him. He had already bashed my head into the dashboard, tied my hands behind my back, to which I could not fight.
Was he saying anything to you?
Shut up, whore. Shut up, bitch. That's all he would say.
She showed us the route they took that morning in 1992.
We were about right here. He reached over and undid my seatbelt and pulled me over by the head and tried to have me perform oral sex on him. And he couldn't function. He got really frustrated and he just punched me and pushed me back into the seat, and I just laid there thinking, please, please don't go to the desert that I think you're going to. The worst part of it was being in that car and seeing everybody else fresh in the morning, living their lives, going to work, and knowing that I was so alone and I was about to be raped or possibly murdered, and life was going on around me. When he started to slow down right here again, I thought, please do not turn to the right. Please do not turn to the right. And he turned to the right. And I knew that's where we were going to go. A place where nobody could hear me scream.
Forced to lie back in the passenger seat, she was only able to see telephone poles going by.
The first telephone pole made me think, oh gosh, I'm going to be raped. The second telephone pole made me think, he's going to hurt me. Each telephone pole just signifies the loss of hope. And so I just looked at him and I said, you could rape me. Is that what you're going to do? I started thinking that I would have some sense of control if I told him what he could do to me. Maybe he wouldn't be so violent. He just started yelling, shut up, bitch, shut up, whore. He called me a whore so many times.
When they were far enough away from any paved roads, in the middle of the desert, he stopped the car.
He got my underwear and shoved them into my mouth. He shoved and shoved until I could feel the sides here starting to make noises like it was tearing. It was just me in that car and this human. That was now the closest thing to a demon you could ever imagine. I knew he had no sympathy, no empathy, no compassion. He tortured me in that car so much. I made my mind go elsewhere. I didn't want to feel it. I didn't want to remember it. And then I saw that he didn't have an erection. And so that made me panic because he started growing more and more angry. So I told him it was okay. He just looked at me and he said, tell me you love me. I couldn't just say it. I had to think. And then I just said, I love you. I love you. And he goes, no, you don't. Say it like you mean it. And he just started strangling me. And my next thought was, I'm never going to be found. I'm never going to be found. I'm going to be dumped in that desert with the rest of the trash, because that's what he thought of me. And I'm going to be eaten by coyotes.
She couldn't breathe.
He put the gun in my mouth. He pistol whipped me. He kept torturing me. I just kept saying, just shoot me, you coward, just shoot me. Then he opened the door and pushed me out. He went to the trunk and he grabbed a big bag of knives. Blades were sticking out of it. When I saw the knives, I just ran. The next thing I knew, something struck me to the back of my head and I fell on the ground.
He dragged her to the car and forced her into the trunk.
And my whole world went dark. And then he drove off.
On the bumpy dirt road, Jennifer says she prayed for death. When we come back,
I felt like a trapped wild animal that was about to be butchered.
In the desert on the outskirts of Palm Springs, trapped in the trunk of a car speeding down the highway, Jennifer S. Benson was convinced she was living the last moments of her life. Then, all of a sudden, something happened. With the twine her abductor used to tie her wrists,
I could just hear crunch, 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 crunch. I could hear them coming undone. And then I just went like this, and they were undone.
In the dark, with her fingers, she found the latch.
I just lifted it and pulled it back down. And he saw that, and he pulled over immediately. He jumped out. He was yelling, "Quit effing around back there. I'll shoot the back seat out."
She shut the trunk, and he got back in the car and stepped on the gas. But the car didn't move. Call it fate, luck, or just coincidence. The car was stuck in soft sand. Jennifer saw her chance.
I opened that trunk again and flipped it up and jumped out. I see a truck coming towards me in the distance, and I just run. All I have on is a sweatshirt, but the sweatshirt goes down to my knees. And when I heard the brakes of that truck come to a halt, I just let out a deep breath. Passenger got out and came and got me and put me in the car. Then we tried to catch him.
Did you see him?
He was gone.
Her rescuers drove her to a gas station. The police and paramedics arrived.
I was put on a gurney, and I overheard a familiar voice talking to a cop, and the voice said, "Oh, she's just a storyteller." And it was my mom. And I screamed, "Mom, I was kidnapped. I was almost murdered."
The police took her story, but her mother had sown a seed of doubt.
What was it like when you realized that people were not believing you?
It was so horrible. It was like I was being re-victimized all over again.
Despite the physical wounds showing evidence of a violent kidnapping, without witnesses, the case went cold. Jennifer spent the next few years in and out of mental institutions wondering about her own sanity. But the strong sense that other women were in danger if this man was still out in the world never left her.
The entire time, I knew he was a murderer. I knew he had done this before because he knew what he was doing. It was so easy.
For years, this shadowy menace continued to hunt and kill women completely under the radar. And then, in 1997, Detective John Booth received a phone call out of the blue.
I was a homicide detective for Palm Springs Police Department. About 7:30 in the morning, I get a phone call that says there's some detectives from Chicago who have arrested a man who's committed some murders there.
The bodies of 3 women had turned up floating in the water near Chicago.
Urdiales and Lynn Huber were dumped in the Wolf Lake. Cassandra Coram was dumped in the Vermilion River.
James McKay is the former Cook County prosecutor.
There were no eyewitnesses to these crimes. It's difficult to identify them. Their IDs are gone. Their clothing are gone.
There were many similarities in the 3 cases. The naked bodies, all dumped in water, and the fact that the victims were all said by police to be sex workers. The idea that there was a killer on the loose created panic.
The FBI and police agencies are trying desperately to solve what one investigator calls a real mystery.
But ballistic evidence would hold the key, linking the deaths of these women.
Police detectives were able to determine that the bullets used to shoot both Urdiales and Lynn Huber were found to be from the same gun, but they just didn't have the gun.
Then police got a tip from a sex worker who'd been terrified by a disturbing request from a client.
He wanted to take her here to Wolf Lake, that he wanted to duct tape her. She would have no part of that. But her information was ultimately sent to the Chicago Police Department.
Based on her description, they realized that this particular man had been caught with an illegal gun not long before. They retrieved it and took it over to the forensics lab.
And lo and behold, the scientists at the crime lab were able to determine that that gun, to the exclusion of every gun in the world, was the gun that killed those 3 ladies.
The gun belonged to a 32-year-old security guard, a former Marine, Desert Storm veteran, originally from Illinois. His name, Andrew Urdiales. He was apprehended coming out of his house on the south side of Chicago where he lived with his parents. He didn't resist when the police showed up. Soon after he sat down with detectives, Urdiales started spilling the beans. To their surprise, murder after murder after murder.
He showed no remorse whatsoever. He was providing a lot of detail for all of these murders because he was proud of it.
He also confessed to other murders he'd committed 2,000 miles away. That's why Detective Booth's phone rang on an April morning in 1997.
While they were interviewing him, he admitted to doing murders here in Palm Springs. And then he told me the names of the Palm Springs victims. He said, Denise Maney. And I go, oh my gosh, she's one of our cold cases, Denise. He said, Tammy Irwin. I go, oh, she's another one of our cold cases.
Detective Booth ran to the airport and took the first flight to Chicago. He was going to sit down with the killer, who had remained faceless and nameless for so long.
This is the most evil person I think I've ever met in my life.
When we come back, Urdiales' confessions. Listen.
Next thing I know, I had the 45 pointed at her and fired 2 more times.
Mr. Urdiales, do you believe that you are sane? Next. Detective John Booth from the Palm Springs Police Department flew to Chicago to interview Andrew Urdiales, a serial killer who was confessing to a growing list of unsolved murders.
I interview him, and he methodically goes from victim to victim to victim, describing what they were wearing.
I remember she was wearing like a one-piece, like a jumpsuit. She had like a little lingerie type thing, jewelry, like the Indian jewelry. She had white tennis shoes, or like the white cloth tennis shoes.
Detective Booth remembers being amazed by the precision of Andrew Urdiales' recollections.
Especially with most of my girls. But she still had on her necklace. Then the next thing I know, the gun was just pointing at her again and fired 2 more times.
Stuff that I actually had to stop and look into our books to make sure that he was telling the truth. Look at the photographs of the deceased and go, oh my gosh, he's exactly right on with the shoes, the underwear, on and on and on.
So I remember her name was Tammy. I think she was wearing maybe denim shorts. She had short blonde hair too.
Tammy Irwin was Urdiales' youngest victim. He shot her 3 times. She was just 18 years old.
She had me wrapped around her little finger. She was my everything.
The families of the victims had been waiting for news. Charles Irwin, Tammy's father, waited 8 long years.
I would lay awake at night just wondering what happened, what she went through. After seeing her, I just thought the worst.
They started to get the news that their loved ones had been the victim of a serial killer who'd just been caught in Chicago.
The emotions just started then, and it has been an emotional roller coaster ever since.
Urdiales confessed in excruciating detail about killing 3 women in Illinois, 5 more in Southern California, including Robin Brandley, his first victim. A total stranger he stabbed 41 times in a parking lot at Saddleback College when he was in the Marines.
I think I stabbed her once in the stomach, feeling out of a scream.
To find out that it was completely random, I mean, that's really hard to understand.
And then Urdiales told Detective Booth about one more who got away.
She was very pretty good. I asked her how old she was. She said she was 19. Her name was Jennifer.
He described for me an incident where he picked up a girl and gave her a ride. She had missed a bus, but got very, very, very mad at her because she gave him a phone number that wasn't good. And that just infuriated him to the point where the next morning he was there waiting for her when she got off duty. And then the violence started.
So it was Urdiales himself who finally corroborated Jennifer's story. He admitted kidnapping her and attempting to rape her, but she escaped.
The hood popped open. She had her hands free at the time. She was still wearing her sweatshirt, and she ran screaming.
The last time he saw her, she was flagging down a pickup truck.
Somebody else picked up and finished when I started, but
he was assuming that those people, well, here's a naked woman, I'll just finish the rape, the sodomy, and the killing of her to finish what he couldn't finish. It was just amazing. I had goosebumps when I heard him say that.
After hearing that confession, Palm Springs police contacted Jennifer.
Don't watch the news. Don't listen to the radio. Just come down as soon as you can. We get to the police station and we walk in and people were looking at me like they had not looked at me ever in my life. They brought me into a room. There was a detective in front of me. He took a deep breath and he said, "Something happened to you 4 or 5 years ago." And I was confused. It ran through my mind, that thing in the desert? No, I'm not even going to bring that up. I don't want to look like a freak. And he said, "You were kidnapped?" And I just thought, oh my goodness, it was real.
What did that mean to you that he remembered you?
It was creepy to hear that he said, and there was one that got away. Her name was Jennifer.
The detective spread some photos of men's faces out on a table.
He said, "We would like you to pick a picture out of these 5 photos of the man that did this to you." And I looked down and I looked right at him and I pushed this picture. I said, "That's him." And he said, "Mrs. Benson, please look at all the photos." And he pushed it back. And I said, "Nope, that's him." And he said, "Well, if this is for sure the man that did this to you, this man is a serial killer, and he killed 8 women, and you're the only one that got away." And I cannot, and I'll never be able to describe what it feels like to realize you're not insane.
Jennifer was finally vindicated, but she would have to face Urdiales again, this time in court. When we return,
I wanted to go because I wanted to see him, and I kind of wanted to say, "Look at me, here I am."
More than 15 years after he first started his killing spree, Andrew Urdiales stood for the first of his 2 trials in the Chicago area. James McKay was the prosecutor for Cook County.
I do believe that he was proud of what he had done. These women that he killed, he had absolutely no respect for. He thought they deserved to die.
The stakes were high for the murders of Laura Ulaki and Lynn Huber, whose bodies were dumped in Wolf Lake. Prosecutors were asking for the death penalty.
There was no remorse by Urdiales. In the back, he'd be cutting jokes with the sheriffs, but in court, he just sat there quietly and showed no emotion whatsoever.
Urdiales was only on trial for the murders in Chicago, but the families of his California victims wanted to see him face justice. Charles Irwin, the father of Urdiales' youngest victim, Tammy, was there from day one.
Every time somebody said something about one of the other girls, my mind thinks that my daughter might have went through some of that too.
Jennifer Asbenson also flew to Chicago.
It was important for you. You wanted to go to the trial. Why?
Yes. The main reason was I wanted to see him go down. I wanted him to get the death penalty. I know what all those girls went through.
Because my daughter wasn't killed there, the only thing we were able to do as victims was tell about our loved ones. I think we were all hoping that his life would have ended there. I'm not a vindictive person or anything like that, but the way he killed these girls was just very brutal, very uncaring, callous.
Julia, who found college student Robin Brandley stabbed 41 times in a college parking lot, was hoping for the death penalty too.
I think when you hunt people and you harm women and you torture them, you don't have any rights. So to me, the death penalty is when somebody clearly cannot be rehabilitated. To have the planet cursed with them is questionable.
Urdiales' defense team was trying to avoid the death penalty by pleading insanity. The prosecution wasn't having it.
The chief forensic psychiatrist in Cook County indicated in no uncertain terms that Urdiales was not insane. He had taken several steps to prepare for his crimes and then took several steps to cover up his crimes, both of which are completely inconsistent with the true insanity defense.
And the jury agreed with the prosecution. On May 30th, 2002, Andrew Urdiales was sentenced to death. 2 years later, he received a second death sentence at Livingston County Courthouse for killing Cassandra Coram and dumping her body in the Vermilion River in Illinois.
I was satisfied when I left Chicago.
But in 2011, Illinois' governor signed a law that abolished the death penalty.
My heart just sunk.
Urdiales' sentence was changed to life without parole. And that's when the district attorneys of Orange County, California, stepped in.
The public thinks, okay, well, he's got life. Life doesn't really mean anything. Life prisoners get paroled all the time. People like Andrew Urdiales don't get better. As long as Andrew Urdiales had access to women in positions of vulnerability, he was going to continue killing them for the rest of his life.
So they began a process of extradition, itching for Urdiales to face the death penalty for the 5 murders he'd committed in their state.
These were human beings, and he had no right to do what he did, and the way he did it was so brutal. Death penalty is the only appropriate sentence.
And here in California, after his 3rd capital trial, I was given exclusive access to speak with him. Mr. Urdiales, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
One of the first things this serial killer told me, he didn't agree with the insanity defense in Chicago.
His trial strategy did not make sense to me. I just did not agree with it because you would have to be totally, excuse my language, batshit crazy to really be found insane.
Do you believe that you are sane?
Yes, I believe I'm sane.
Do you believe that you were sane during the 80s and the 90s?
I was in the Marine Corps, so I had to be pretty sane. What'd you say?
Do you believe that you were of sound mind and body?
I believe so.
So how did Urdiales become such a monster? Who is this serial killer? Are there any clues to be found in his childhood? Coming up in our next hour, a psychiatrist who examined Urdiales weighs in. And we ask this killer some very tough questions. You're leaving something out.
What is this that I'm leaving out?
The truth. Mr. Urdiales, let's just cut to the chase on this. More of the last interview Andrew Urdiales will ever give in our second hour. Operating under the radar, a serial killer who murdered more women than Jack the Ripper, discarding their bodies in alleyways, lakes, and deserts. Only one woman managed to escape to tell the story.
Here I am in the middle of the desert about to be murdered.
Sick or evil?
He was evil.
Faceless and nameless for a decade, the man who viciously murdered 8 women finally brought to justice.
Andrew Urdiales.
Andrew Urdiales.
Andrew Urdiales hated women, and he enjoyed killing them and torturing them. That's what he was all about. That was Andrew Urdiales' thing.
Sentenced to death in Illinois for killing 3 women, his life was spared when the governor abolished the death penalty. As a result, the state of California extradited him to face justice for 5 murders he committed there.
What makes him different from other people that you've tried, even for horrible murders?
He enjoyed it. He went out and hunted women. It's just like a wrecking ball, the damage he's done.
This is the most evil person I think I've ever met in my life.
In an exclusive interview, the last one he will ever give, I try to get inside the mind of serial killer Andrew Urdiales.
Let's talk about the truth. You did it. I want to know why you did it. Here I am. This is Chris Cuomo in New York, testing out the IFB or the speakerphone. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I just had some concerns about how this is going to be played and how this is going to be portrayed. Because I know your show is called Inside Evil. What kind of questions you're going to ask me?
The Orange County Sheriff's Department gave me an hour to interview serial killer Urdiales when he was being held in the Theo Lacey facility for his 3rd trial, which would determine whether he would live or die.
Mr. Urdiales, I'm the one who's going to determine the questions.
All right.
All right, good. So if you're ready to begin, we will. What is it that you want people to know that you believe sheds new light on the explanation of how these women died?
That's pretty hard. I don't think I want to answer that question.
Okay, and can you tell me why you don't want to answer it when you have answered it before to police voluntarily?
Voluntarily?
You told them that you did it and said you better call California.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Okay. You know whether or not you did this, yes?
Correct. I'm not trying to be coy or play with you, but I'm trying to preserve some things or maybe an appeal.
Keep in mind, this man has already fully confessed to these murders. He was found guilty, not in 1 court of law, but in 3. All since his arrest and capture in 1997.
Now, these are hard photos, but it shows just, how deliberate he was.
Matt Murphy and Eric Scarborough are prosecutors with the District Attorney's Office of Orange County, where in May of 2018, Urdiales was found guilty of murdering 5 women. 23-year-old Robin Brandley at Saddleback College in Mission Viejo, Mary Ann Wells in San Diego, and in the Palm Springs area, Julie McGee and Denise Maney, and the youngest, 18-year-old Cammie Irwin.
One of the things that the detectives really wanted to do is they wanted to make sure that they had the right guy. So even though he's confessing to the crimes, they're asking him very specific details.
That only he would know.
That only the killer would know.
Because he would go right down to the shoes and tell you what they had on their feet.
He knew down to the color, the type, everything.
In an effort to unveil Urdiales' M.O., they take me to the beginning, to the murder of college student Robin Brandley.
Robin Brandley, that's everybody's sister, everybody's girlfriend, everybody's friend. She's just walking to her car. And he stabbed her so many times, and it was so awful.
Listen to this confession tape. It's from Chicago, describing Robin's murder. It would be his first when he was a Marine stationed at Camp Pendleton.
I remember I had a knife with me. I bought a big old hunting knife. And I was just feeling aggravated, pissed off about something.
He gets in an argument with some fellow Marines in Camp Pendleton and decides tonight's the night. So he goes out with this gigantic hunting knife that he's got. He climbs up a hill. He uses his Marine Corps training to essentially sneak up on her.
I think I said I wanted her purse, and she said, "You got my purse." And then we just stood there for a while, and the knife just went in her back.
He brutally attacks her, stabs her 41 times, and she's on her back, and she dies with her eyes open.
I think I did was just start stabbing once, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 times, give or take.
She's staring at this monster who's stabbing her for absolutely no reason.
Investigator Helen Moreno, who flew from Orange County to interview the newly discovered serial killer, remembers asking him, why? Why did he do it?
Let's say when you're walking up to her, when you first grab her, think, what are you thinking?
Nothing there.
Nothing there? How about after you leave?
There's nothing there. Just a blank spot.
Would you agree that somebody stabbing somebody else 41 times speaks to a degree of violence and hostility?
That's correct. That's a good assessment.
So if somebody stabs somebody else 41 times, they must have some kind of reason or some kind of emotion fueling them, right?
No, I'm not going to answer that.
You think you could stab someone 41 times for no reason?
I don't know.
How did he get this way? When we come back. Charity Lee loved being a mother.
How is it even possible? I remember being like, oh my God, you can love two people this much?
I completely killed somebody.
You think you killed somebody?
No, I know I did.
Did anybody warn you when you were getting ready to enter the house of what it was in there?
It's just all bloody. It was awful.
Doesn't seem to be haunting for the person who did it.
There are times where I peer inward at myself and think, why are you still even alive?
Inside Evil with Chris Cuomo, Sunday at 9 on HLN.
If you look down to the end of the row near the windmills, you'll see where the location of Denise Maney was. That's where he raped and sodomized her. And that's where he ended up slitting her throat and killing her.
Detective John Booth of the Palm Springs Police Department remembers exactly where the bodies of Andrew Urdiales' victims were found, including the youngest, Tammy Irwin.
You could see her body from the roadway, dressed in shorts and kind of a summery outfit. She had these cloth tennis shoes on, and she was laying face down in the dirt. You could see tire tracks leading away from her, which is, we later figured out were the car tracks of Andrew Urdiales' vehicle.
Detective Booth interrogated the serial killer in Chicago after Urdiales confessed to 3 murders there and 5 more in California.
Well, at first I was a little afraid. Just the way he was callously talking about what he had done to these women just let you know that there was no doubt in your mind he was an evil person.
John Booth interrogated Urdiales about the night he shot 31-year-old Mary Ann Wells in the head at point-blank range.
What did you do after that happened? Well, I just didn't really feel anything. It was just quiet and peaceful.
You think you have the normal range of emotions that you react to situations the way most people would?
I should.
Do you?
I believe so. I did 7 years in the Marine Corps as a radio operator. I'm a Desert Storm veteran.
Urdiales enlisted in the Marines when he was 19. He was based first at Camp Pendleton and then 29 Palms in California. He was deployed to Okinawa and Desert Storm. 2 years into what he describes as a frustrating career, Urdiales started killing.
I was always trained to kill in boot camp.
Forensic psychiatrist Park Dietz evaluated Urdiales as an expert witness for the prosecution in Chicago.
In describing some of the homicides, he even described himself as being at war, or it's like combat, and I'm a trained killer.
Desert is opportunity, Matt, for this man. Why?
Well, if you're torturing and raping somebody and nobody's going to hear a woman's screams, you basically can have at it.
The killings were meticulously planned.
So in the desert, he had a storage locker, and in that, he kept a murder weapon. He kept things that he could tie these women up with.
A storage unit, convenient for stepping off the base, killing, and then returning to duty as if nothing had happened. That's how he managed to get away with murdering 4 women during his 7-year military career. In 1991, he was honorably discharged. But even after he was out of the Marines and back home in Illinois, he kept going back to California to hunt women.
He would vacation out there, just like people would go vacation to ski or to fish or to go surfing. That was his thing.
Do you believe that emotionally you're able to control yourself in situations?
Yes.
The reason I'm asking you is because the title of this series, Inside Evil, that title bothers you, but...
It concerns me, yeah.
It concerns me too because of the kinds of people I wind up meeting while we're doing these documentaries. It's a search to get inside the mind of people who do things that we believe we're not capable of doing, that human beings don't naturally kill multiple people on a whim and go on about their normal lives.
That's what I was accused of.
Well, that's what you were convicted of many times and sentenced to death.
Yeah, I was accused and convicted of.
Do you believe you're different than anybody else?
No.
But juries heard hours of courtroom testimony about what might be wrong with Urdiales. His lawyers tried blaming his upbringing. They said he was raised in an abusive household in the hands of a depressed mother who had lost her eldest son in the Vietnam War and drank during her pregnancies, causing Urdiales to be born with fetal alcohol syndrome, a disorder that can carry physical, learning, and behavioral problems and causes the brain to degenerate rapidly in adulthood.
You don't buy it?
Well, his IQ is one point shy of superior, which is totally inconsistent with fetal alcohol. Fetal alcohol is very real in the world. Andrew Urdiales just doesn't suffer from it.
They say that part of your brain is degenerating at an accelerated rate. And they say that may be the fetal alcohol syndrome. What do you think of that?
Personally, I personally disagree with that. I've had several MRIs done, and they kept saying the same things. I don't know exactly what they're getting at, but this fetal alcohol, I sort of disagree with that from day one.
They put it together with a picture of your childhood, that you had a mother who was very protective, that there was trouble in the home, that you were subjected to a lot of abuse and hostility.
If you're basing that on what you heard in trial, I've come to disagree with that.
You know the truth of how you grew up and how your mom was. You tell me.
I grew up in the 70s. Our family was blue-collar, working class. And I know a lot of things that came out and how they try to portray them. And I would say that that was just not, that was not fair.
How would you define your attitude when you were a child?
That's a really good question. I'm kind of glad you asked that. I was very emotional, very naive, very not so much sheltered, but I was just kind of like slow to pick up on things.
But shortly after he was apprehended, Urdiales admitted to having serious anger issues to Detective Moreno.
He felt that he had been wronged a lot of times, that people wouldn't listen to him.
I always had a violent temper, shitty temper sometimes, lousy. I never really could actually fit in.
Dr. Park Dietz points out a reason why Urdiales may have had trouble making friends.
I thought all of those oddities could be explained by the known Tourette syndrome, which is observable, and he clearly has. In his case, he had hyperactivity, fidgeting, and squirming, and he also had facial tics with grimacing and various kinds of facial movements. Peers who don't understand it can bully kids who are that way. You can see how being picked on is a frustrating life trajectory. And in his case, the dominant emotion to emerge from that was anger.
Did you see yourself as angry when you were a young man?
That's a good question. I would say I'll probably be like no more angry than the next person.
I never had the ability to really learn how to be close to people.
The picture that emerges is one of a loner, angry at the world.
You can think of these as alternate careers for a certain breed of losers. This could have gone in any bad direction. He could have been a bomber, he could have been a mass murderer, he could have been an assassin. He wasn't destined specifically to be a serial killer. But with his resources and skill, that was the one he could achieve.
When we come back, was there one group of people who really infuriated Urdiales?
I just really can't even believe I'm standing here today talking about it because I thought I was going to die.
One night when she was 19 years old, Jennifer Asbenson accepted a ride to her overnight nursing job from a stranger who turned out to be Andrew Urdiales. The following morning, he was waiting for her and asked her to join him for breakfast. There was a night and day difference between the two rides. This time, Urdiales would kidnap her, violently attempt a sexual assault, tie her up, and lock her in the trunk of his car, forcing her into the fight of her life in the middle of the desert near Palm Springs.
It was like I was in hell and I was with the devil, and there's no way to even explain the sheer terror.
Forensic psychiatrist Park Dietz assessed that Urdiales' disappointments in life led to his anger issues.
He is motivated by revenge against the world, especially women. Women who rejected him, women who didn't provide for him, women who fired him.
All I saw was hate.
An angry loner. On top of that, a sexual sadist.
He quite grudgingly admitted having fantasies of bondage, which he related to wanting to have power and control and his anger, particularly at women. And I got enough to be sure he's a sadist.
Do you have a personal problem with women? Do women make you angry?
No.
Do you have feelings of hostility towards women? Do you think that women sometimes deserve violence?
No.
He may deny it now, but listen to his confession from 1997.
A lot of times I would give women something to talk and they just get angry about something.
Jennifer's case, he told detectives the fake number she gave him during their first ride set him off.
Well, it was a bad number and I was kind of upset about that.
That's when he took off into the desert and attempted to rape and kill her. But miraculously, she escaped, jumping out of the trunk of his car and running for her life.
In this case, we had a survivor. So she's able to fill in a lot of the blanks for what these women went through.
Do you believe he hated women?
Oh, he did hate women, and I believe I know why. Because the whole time I was with him, he had erectile dysfunction. He could never perform.
Jennifer says his own inadequacy made him furious.
I asked him about it, and of course met denial. But she would know, and I would trust her interpretation of that.
When Urdiales confessed, he didn't hold back on details. Please be advised, they are extremely explicit.
I took my shirt off, I zipped my pants, and I tried to rape her.
You say you tried. Was it not successful?
No.
What happened?
I was so excited I got to get fully erected.
What happened next?
I kept trying to rape her, she kept trying to help me, but nothing happened. The tension started to build up more and more. Then after a while, like something, I had my hand on her neck, I just started squeezing her, choking her with my hand.
By the time I sat down with him, he wouldn't even admit having an issue with women.
Have women done things to make you angry? Angry to the point of violence?
No.
Never?
No.
Urdiales saying he has no malice toward women is a contradiction to things he told me.
Urdiales stole 8 women's lives and shattered so many others.
It's just like a wrecking ball, the damage he's done.
Steve was only 13 when his mother was found shot in an alleyway in downtown San Diego. She was Urdiales' third victim.
She was 17 years older than me. Absolutely tried her hardest to make sure that I had a good life. For those whole first 13 years of my life, it was only her and I.
When she was killed, Steve had just moved in with his dad in an effort to get to know him, and Marianne was going through a rough patch.
My mom was not a career prostitute. At the time of her death, obviously she was, but it doesn't matter because she's got every right to live, and he robbed her of that.
7 out of the 8 women Urdiales killed were reported to be sex workers.
Prostitutes make the perfect victims because part of their trade is going to isolated locations that nobody can see or hear what's going on.
He told me he had been with 200 prostitutes. That means that 95% of the time he didn't kill them. The ones he did kill, in each instance, he was able to describe something that made him angry. The source of the anger differs from case to case and could well be inability to get an erection.
It just triggered something inside of him, and he just became extremely violent. Guns, knives were all in play. The obvious hatred he had for women is remarkable.
The cold-blooded murder of Marianne Wells, Steve's mom, is a perfect example.
He knew that she was a single mom, and he killed her anyway, which also shows that just what a monster he is, because he knows that he is going to leave that little boy in the world by himself.
It took the police over 2 months to find Steve and tell him his mother was gone.
Not being able to say goodbye to my mother or have a service or a funeral or see a body, I think, had a negative effect on me because I had reoccurring dreams that she was hiding from me, all these years.
He doesn't care about people. He's deficient in empathy.
Urdiales himself confessed that killing made him feel better.
It's like you stabbed once back, and then it just kept on going until it went away. The nausea, the disappointment, the anger, the frustration.
He described it as a tension builds up, and then by destroying something or killing a person, the tension is relieved.
Steve, Jennifer, and the other California victims' families would get to face Urdiales when he went on trial in their home state. When we come back. Did anybody warn you when you were getting ready to enter the house?
It's just all bloody. It's awful.
There are times where I peer inward at myself and think, why are you still even alive?
Inside Evil with Chris Cuomo, Sunday at 9 on HLN.
March 2018. In California, Andrew Urdiales stands trial for a 3rd time.
Andrew Urdiales had this unique procedural experience where he was convicted of 2 murders, went to death row in Illinois, and the sentence was commuted.
Matt Murphy, Orange County District Attorney.
So public safety-wise, as prosecutors, we have an obligation to ensure that that person does not get out.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Andrew Urdiales, guilty of the crime of murder in the 1st degree.
More than 20 years after he was caught, the jury found Andrew Urdiales guilty of murdering 5 women in California.
He did it because he liked it. He has absolutely no remorse.
And 5 months later, the death penalty phase of sentencing.
I remember knowing this day would come. I just didn't know it would take this long. It's been a long time.
On October 5th, 2018, Andrew Urdiales faces his victims' families as they address the court.
On April the 16th, 1989, the defendant not only killed my daughter, but he killed me inside.
Charles Irwin, the father of Tammy, Urdiales' youngest victim.
Would she have given me grandchildren? Would she have gone on to be somebody special? We don't know. He ruined my family, tore my family apart. Thank you, Your Honor.
Then, Jennifer Asbenson unexpectedly took the stand.
I didn't plan to say anything, but I still have a will and a fight in me, and I don't want to give up because of what that man did to me. And it's just surreal to be standing here because I imagined I was going to be chopped up laying in that desert and be found, and nobody would have known what happened to me. So it is just surreal, and I feel like I'm speaking for the other girls too. They're my angels.
And then the convicted killer asked to address the jury that had found him guilty and was about to determine whether he would live or die. The judge allowed it under strict guidelines.
Let me make sure that I'm clear. I will not allow Mr. Urdiales to re-argue the case. I don't want to hear about the police investigation. That is not appropriate for me to consider in sentencing.
Thank you, Your Honor. You see, I'm kind of a little shaky. I'm actually kind of nervous. First, to the jury, I'd like to apologize for having to hear all the sordid details of the case.
And then a bombshell. Urdiales agrees with the jury's guilty verdict based on the case that was presented in court.
I understand how they told it, and if I was a juror in my case, I probably would have done the same thing. So I have no hard feelings, and I understand and I respect the decision.
I've tried over 200 cases. I have never heard a defendant lean over, look at the jurors who are there for sentencing, and agree with their verdict.
To the victim's family, I express my condolences for their loss. Yeah, that's all I can say. And I have to apologize to Mr. Wells. Mr. Wells has lost his mother.
When he said my name, it made me feel like he's sitting in his jail cell. He's thought about how he has impacted people.
And Mr. Urdiales too as well.
Just kind of froze for a minute. And then I was upset because he doesn't know me.
To this incident, I'd like to express my sincere apologies for what happened.
Maybe he's sorry he did it to us now that he sees us as real human beings, but he's a monster, so that's probably just wishful thinking.
Through the years, in and out of court for the 3 trials in 2 states, the victims' families have become close.
You know that you're not alone, and they're kindred spirits, and they're people that understand me, and I understand them.
I have talked to one of them, Jennifer Asbenson, and the things that she went through, and my mind thinks that my daughter might have went through some of that too.
They all sat together to hear the judge's decision. Will it be life in prison or death?
I find that these murders were premeditated, willful, and deliberate, and committed with malice aforethought.
When we come back, is this finally the end for Andrew Urdiales? Convicted of murdering 5 women in California, Andrew Urdiales received 5 separate sentences.
For the willful, unlawful, premeditated, and deliberate murder of Robin Brandley. For the willful, unlawful, premeditated, and deliberate murder of Julie McGee, of Mary Ann Wells, Tammy Irwin's murder of Denise Mann. Andrew Urdiales shall be put to death within the walls of the California State Prison at San Quentin.
It felt like all of the evil was just sucked out of that room.
A triumphant moment for the victims' families and Jennifer Asbenson.
Feels like a second chance at life with the antagonist gone.
It's been a long time coming.
Within days, Urdiales would be moved to death row in San Quentin, but I was allowed to talk to him while he was still in the Orange County Sheriff's custody. What was your reaction when you heard that you had been sentenced to death for your crimes?
I was not surprised. I was expecting it. No hard feelings against the jury.
Do you think it was fair?
They saw what they saw, and they thought they... Trying to get my train of thought here. They based their decision on what they saw and heard.
Do you acknowledge that you killed the women that you were accused of killing?
I don't think I want to answer that question. I mean, I already know how I'm portrayed right now. It seems like my side hasn't been really heard yet.
What is your side of this? Why is what's happening to you wrong?
Are you familiar with the station I was brought to, Area 2 headquarters in Chicago?
I am.
Anything comes out Area 2 is bullshit.
Area 2 is the police station where Urdiales was interrogated when he was first apprehended.
They've been known to torture and abuse suspects into confessions.
So it seems that this was his agenda for agreeing to our interview, claiming his confession had been coerced.
They took one guy, handcuffed him to a chair, and threw him out a fucking window.
Okay, but they didn't do that to you.
They didn't do that to me, but that's the atmosphere
Okay.
I was exposed to. Area 2 headquarters was a torture facility. They took another guy.
All right, so
stuck a shotgun up his ass and made him confess to statements.
But they didn't do that to you either.
2 headquarters for you.
We looked into his allegations about people being mistreated at the Area 2 police headquarters in Chicago. And yes, that did happen according to an investigation by Amnesty International. And it happened to more than 100 people between 1972 and 1991. The thing is, Andrew Urdiales was interrogated in 1997.
One of the things he claimed was the detectives actually hit him in the face and beat him. We have photographs of him immediately after these interrogations. There's not a bruise, there's no blood, there's nothing that would indicate that he suffered any sort of trauma at the hands of these detectives.
Helen Moreno says he had the perfect opportunity to complain to her and the other California detectives who flew in to interrogate him.
Since you've been here, has there been any promises or anything made to you reference giving up this information or telling him this information?
No, I gave it voluntarily. And I thought, well, if I'm here now, I might as well just tell him what I know.
Detective John Booth talked to Urdiales in Area 2 right after he was arrested.
Okay, you're doing okay? You got some more orange juice or do you need some more? I think I'll put it on the can. Yeah, I'll get you some more.
We listened to his confession and heard nothing aggressive from police.
Chicago Area 2 had nothing whatsoever to do with the DNA that we found, and it had nothing to do with the expended shell casings, and it had nothing to do with his confession in any way.
I read some of his own confession back to him.
After killing somebody, everything stops. There's a feeling of relief, but also being empty and drained. Now, this is what you said. And when you said what did you mean?
I don't care what I said, because in hindsight, I was wrong, Mr. Cuomo.
What does that mean?
Considering that that statement was taken in the Area 2 headquarters under duress.
Okay, fine.
Area 2 headquarters is bullshit.
So then let's talk about the truth, because it's also bullshit that you didn't kill these women. You did it. I want to know why you did it.
Well, I'll address that in a court of law, under oath if I have to, if I come back on appeal.
Urdiales says he wanted to bring up his allegations of police coercion in his sentencing hearing, but the judge wouldn't allow it.
I don't want to hear anything like that. That is not appropriate for me to consider it sentencing.
The only thing I was able to say, I expressed my condolences to the victims' families, and I did offer an apology to Ms. Asmussen for what happened. And something I pointed out to my lawyer, I was kind of like really cautious about what I wanted to say. As far as anything else.
While Urdiales apologized to Jennifer, he made a point of not apologizing to the families.
Well, I only expressed my condolences, and that's as far as I'm going to go. I express my condolences for their loss, because anything I might say, it might come up where it might affect my credibility.
Mr. Urdiales, you say you apologized to Ms. Asmussen.
Right.
Well, if you apologize, that means you did it. You're insulting the victims' families a little bit, because you say you express condolences. And if you have condolences for the families, then you shouldn't play with whether or not you're responsible for taking their loved ones, because that's how you show remorse, by saying, I did it, I'm sorry, and I'm sorry for that loss. Now, either you feel that or you don't. Do you or do you not?
I'm sorry for their loss. And that's as far as I'm going to go.
I hear you. I'm just saying, if you want to be found credible in a court of law,
I'll
take it.
Yeah, I'll take it.
I'll take it, because this is about...
Well, I express my condolences, and that's as far as I'm going to go.
Less than a month after our interview, something happened that completely took everyone by surprise.
Things are always different than you think they're going to be.
When we come back.
Let me ask you something, if you want to be honest. How often do you think about the people connected to these crimes? How often do their names and faces come back to you?
That's a good question. Let me say that the victims' families, they have my condolences. And that's as far as I can go with that.
Well, I don't know how much that will mean to them when you won't admit the truth of what happened.
I hope I've been helpful as best as I can, though. I'm sorry you didn't get, I don't know if you, I know what you're getting at, but I'm sorry if I didn't give it to you what you needed.
Oh, you know the expression, the truth will set you free.
Shortly after our interview, Andrew Urdiales was transferred to death row at California's maximum security prison, San Quentin. 3 weeks later, news that took everyone by surprise.
54-year-old Andrew Urdiales' body was found Friday night.
Urdiales was found unresponsive in his cell.
We were informed that there was irrefutable evidence that he intentionally killed himself, and that was in the form of a note. But I have not seen it.
Prosecutor Matt Murphy told us that Urdiales hanged himself. We reached out to the prison asking to see the note, but never heard back.
What does it mean to you that he took his own life?
I just felt shock and disbelief. Did he kill himself because this new hell, which is San Quentin, that he was brought into was so scary to him? Did it just consume him?
It's not surprising that someone who's facing capital punishment would commit suicide when they have an opportunity. It really is a calculus, as it is for anyone. Is my life worth living, or isn't it?
Whether Urdiales would ultimately face capital punishment was uncertain. California has over 700 inmates on death row. They're far more likely to die of suicide or old age. The state has not executed anyone in over a decade. In fact, the governor just ordered the state's execution chamber to be closed.
Remember, Andrew Urdiales was a professional death row inmate. He'd been on death row in Illinois for years and years and years. And San Quentin, of the death rows in America, it's not bad. They get up to 10 hours of yard time a day. They get their own cell. They get TV. Depression was not a big problem. There were no real suicide attempts in his past. So the idea that he wound up in San Quentin and suddenly became so depressed that he decided to commit suicide is absolutely not what happened here.
Matt Murphy feels strongly that he knows why Urdiales killed himself.
Andrew Urdiales agreed with the jury's findings, and he hanged himself on death row. Andrew Urdiales was carrying out the jury's recommendation.
Him being gone, does that end this for you?
It'll never be ended for me because I have PTSD that reminds me of what happened to me every single day. How it has helped me that he has died is now that I can't play these neurotic fantasies in my mind that he could one day get out and come and find me and kill me.
Jennifer started writing all her thoughts on Post-it notes, which turned into an autobiography called The Girl in the Treehouse.
My whole purpose of writing that book was to change my story, to change it into what I wanted it to be.
She wrote it in a safe space where she could process what happened.
I'm not a victim. And the only times I was a victim was when I was in that circumstance.
If it were to turn out to be true that he hanged himself because he could no longer deal with what he was, what does that mean to you?
That makes perfect sense to me. He can no longer deal with his demons.
Maybe a lawyer told him his chances of a successful appeal were close to nil. Or did the guilt finally become too much to bear? Whether Andrew Urdiales experienced one iota of remorse is a secret he carried to his grave.
He tortured these women who begged for their lives. He left a trail of destruction. This is a guy that had every opportunity in life. He had a high enough IQ. You look at a series of famous serial killers in the history of the United States, very often they have backgrounds very similar to Andrew Urdiales. They do it because they like doing it. They like doing it, and more importantly, they're going to keep doing it. And there is no cure for this. They're human predators, and they will keep doing it as long as they're drawing breath.